Good morning. Thousands of parents are fuming about what they regard as the chaos and crisis in education in British Columbia. Many students are objecting. School board officials are mad as a hatter. Education officials are defensive, except for Jack Heinrich. But see what happened at a meeting in Vancouver last night.
A crowd of 1,500 strong packs the gym at Charles Tupper Secondary School. Among them, the lone social credit MLA, Russ Fraser. He will hear many unfriendly remarks about his government's approach to education.
And those kids, especially in the secondary schools, know practically exactly what's going to happen in these cuts. That there's going to be two kids sitting at a lab, and one of them is holding the Bunsen burner, and the other one is watching. And Van Tech is going to get streamlined. They're not going to have any academics. It's going to be going elsewhere. And the kids aren't getting the support from the parents. And quite honestly, I'm taking my day off work the next time they have anything happening, and I'm joining the kids. Thank you.
My daughter, 8 years old, has a friend who lives 2 houses down who came recently from Poland. She wants to know, are the cutbacks in English as a second language going to mean that Margaret, her friend, is no longer going to be able to function properly in school? Is it going to mean that she's going to have to go back to Poland in order to have a chance at a decent education?
Some of these things that the minister has been saying has really got my anger up. He's portraying our opposition to these cuts against education as some sort of partisan battle, that there's some NDPers against the Socreds, and that's not true. There are a lot of people who are against this education cutback, and it cuts across all party lines. It's a big fight of the ordinary people. My question is to the school board. Why have they poured cold water on the students' struggle against these cutbacks? We need them more in the streets. I want to join them in the streets. The lady who just spoke. We're opposed to these cutbacks.
Would you like to hear a few words from the MLA for Vancouver South?
Please. Thank you.
Apparently not, because shortly after he began speaking, most got up to leave.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is time to close, and I don't think that was very nice.
The debate continued with one parent, though, during an impromptu news conference.
The schools are left with fewer resources. That's the point that we're trying to get across, and somehow the government doesn't seem to realize that when there comes a time when you're jeopardizing the whole bloody system. It's a key issue. You can't sit on the fence and say, I will take back your message. You've got to take a stand on it. And if Heinrich doesn't want to go to cabinet and fight for the money for Vancouver school boards or for the public school system in BC, then he should resign. That's the point. And you should make sure that he does that kind of thing. It's extremely important.
And there's the man whom that particular interested party wants to resign, Jack Heinrich, the Minister of Education for the Government of Victoria. And I shall be questioning Mr. Heinrich, and he'll be explaining himself, and you'll be questioning Mr. Heinrich this morning after the break. Jack Heinrich is the Minister of Education in the Social Credit Government of Victoria. It's the most unenviable task of any minister in the government, except perhaps that of the Premier, who hasn't really got involved in this education crisis yet. Would you agree with me, Mr. Heinrich, just in a simple, non-controversial manner, that this province is in a massive uproar because of what is perceived to be your deliberate social credit restraint plan to cut and slash and destroy much of the quality of education, if only by accident, under the name of restraint? Are we in the middle of such a furor?
I don't think that we're in the middle of such a furor, although it would appear that in the Vancouver area there are some feelings which are running, and they're quite strong. Now, Jack, I have to tell you, in the last 3 months, I have visited over 2/3 of the school districts in British Columbia. I have canvassed this province from corner to corner, and I have been spending 2.5 to 3 hours with every school district.
That's admirable, but you're not winning the battle, you're losing it.
The question is, though, whereabouts are these views coming from? The emphasis seems to be right here in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver. I am not telling you, though, that there are not some problems in other parts of the province. What we have to ask ourselves is this: why did we have to address the problem? You know, little over 2 years ago, much of the press in Vancouver was coming down and saying, you know, something has to be done with respect to the funding of education. I thought that I'd look back, and I find out in out of one of the Vancouver papers a statement like this: something is desperately wrong with the way school boards are budgeting. But the most telling story of all was this: many trustees, school board staff, and politicians agree that it's a system out of control and badly in need of revision. The question then is, how do you address that? Yes, I came into the portfolio about 20 months ago. There have been a number of changes. Now, what are those changes? First of all, we've changed the fiscal year, so it becomes this dovetail of the school year. Bill 6 was brought in. Yes, Bill 6 eroded the autonomy to some degree. What did Bill 6 do? We gave us the ability to cap budgets. We established service levels, and we think that those service levels are most adequate. What did we do? We brought in the CSP program to check some of the arbitration awards. We gave them 3 years. These budgets did not come out over like a thunderbolt out of the sky. They've been there for 3 years.
In effect, though, that's all admirable, but it's all political, and you may be right.
That's not political. That involves dollars.
I know. I'm going to give you the dollars, and I don't like to get involved in dollar discussions because nobody understands them. 82, I think it was. I'm looking at your speech that you made at the Board of Trade the other day.
Yes.
There was a budget of $1.6 billion overall for education, right?
No, it's more than that. It's more than that. I think we're very sure. I think it's going to be about $1.624 billion.
All right.
That's a lot of money.
That's what I said. $1.624 billion in 82.
Yes.
In effect, you have since cut that by about $75 million.
Not right. It was 1.699. Let's say roughly $1.7 billion, and it has been reduced over 3 years to 1.624, which it works out, to be honest with you, something in the order of a little bit more than $20, $22, $23 million per year over 3 fiscal years.
On the face of it, it's a very small dollar cut over the 3 fiscal years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We're agreed on that.
Yes, we're agreeing on that.
But inflation has taken place and wage increases, like it or lump it, have taken place, correct?
Correct.
So therefore...
But add the next question. You should have one more.
What's the next one?
Well, the next thing is the enrollment within British Columbia is declining significantly.
So enrollment goes down, inflation takes place, budgets are reduced, and the net effect has been to streamline much of what people regarded as the fat in the system. Now, you would agree with that?
Yes, I think they've done an admirable job in that area, too.
To agree with that. And now we've got a situation which the ordinary layman cannot understand. You say there is no money in the budgets for 85 for any salary increases, not by arbitration, not by increment, not by negotiation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why, therefore, do you allow the school boards to continue to go to arbitration and worry about the prospect of paying? Because you have said bluntly, there will be no wage increases in 85, 86. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, why do you not use your power under the Interim School Act and prevent all this confusion and put your cards on the line by saying, under the Education Interim Finance Act, not a nickel of wage increase in 85 or 86? Why don't you say that?
You know,
why don't you make that law?
Wouldn't it be interesting? Wouldn't it be a change if people who are negotiating increases recognize that the province is not in a position to advance more funding? Do you know what is constantly said by the advocates before the arbitration panels is this: we don't have the correct figure. In any event, the government will continue to put more money in. So what we're going to do is make these type of awards. We think that we can get more from arbitration. Now, I'm a touch reluctant to remove the arbitration process because it's an opportunity for for both parties to express their views. The CSP program this year, under the guidelines, makes 0 a factor. Increments are included as a factor, and the ability to pay is paramount.
So therefore, you're sitting there hoping that Peck, the commissioner, will, when arbitration awards are given, say no, 0 and no increments. That's what you're telling Peck, isn't it? In effect.
What I am hoping this is what will come, but I'm also hoping that the school districts will advance their arguments that they do not have the ability to pay.
But you're the boss. You have centralized education beyond any state of centralization in British Columbia 4. You've got the power to freeze the budgets.
Yes.
You have in effect frozen the budgets, haven't you?
Yes.
But you've still allowed the school boards to say, we've got an arbitration award we've got to pay. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
No wonder Vancouver School Board is confused and talking about the need for a $17 million cut.
You see, why? You raise an interesting point. Much of the propaganda which has been flying around this area has been over an alleged $17 million cut. Now, I think it's very clear to the public now that there wasn't a $17 million cut at all. It's something in the order of $7.1 million from what I can find out.
That's the cut you ordered.
That is the one. Now, the question comes up. If they are going to allege that they're short this amount of money, they're obviously taking into consideration a number of inflationary factors, as well as, well, we better build in increases because we think what's going to be awarded will be an increase. We don't know yet, do we?
Yes, we do. In Alberta yesterday, compensation, an award was negotiated by the Deputy Director of the CSP for more than 5% over the next 18 months. Now, does that not stagger you?
Yes, it does, but I think there's other factors we must take into consideration. Perhaps Alberni is in the position where they can afford to pay something. I do not know. Maybe they have a surplus. I have found throughout the province a number of districts which do have these, but they were designed to look over the period, and they were designed to look after the period from January 1 to June 30th, which is the short fiscal year. The concern which I have on that, and of course I don't know if that's a final award, I've heard it first, as a matter of fact, from you.
Right.
But the concern that I have is not in the short fiscal year, that is the first 6 months of 1985, but the impact that will have on the full fiscal 85-86 from July 1 to June 30th of 1986. That's where the concern is.
Would you agree with my simple premise that were you to say there will be no wage increases, Vancouver School Board could not then budget a potential $17 million cut?
If there were no, you mean for the government to come out and say there shall be none, period, and what you're really calling for is a legislative
well, that's what you've done. You got up there and you said in Vancouver the other day, there is no provision in the fiscal framework for salary increases. Correct. Now, I know the teachers are hypocritical about it. You also say, if teachers seek under awarded salary increases, it will be at the cost of teaching positions.
That's correct.
So you're telling the school boards, ignore anything you get from arbitration, aren't you? Why don't you just be tough enough, if you're a real tough restraint government, and say, that's it, no more arbitration just now, no salary increases 85-86?
Well, it's...
Are you prepared to say it here?
I suppose there's always that possibility, but I think one thing that you have to keep in mind is that we have brought in certain guidelines, and that we have to refer them to the CSP office. That's the way the entire format is structured.
But at the risk of boring viewers, this is why the confusion in Vancouver School Board. You'd say 8 million. They'd say, no, we're going to have inflation. We're going to have a wage increase. It's 17 million. Mm-hmm. And they're entitled to say that because they've got an arbitration award.
Well,
2.3%.
Yeah, excuse me, but that arbitration award hasn't been, or perhaps it has been reviewed by the CSP, and it's been sent back to the parties for review.
In fact, Ed Peck is wasting his time looking at these arbitration awards because you have said, I don't care about arbitration awards. I'm not paying any. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm merely trying to clear it up for the benefit of mystified parents and teachers. Mm-hmm. Teachers will always go for increases, and you say, if you get increases, you lose your jobs. Right?
That's right. That's right. The question I have to ask myself is, through these difficult periods of time when everybody has to just look at their neighbor, the cuts which have occurred in the private sector, which is funding this to a considerable extent, And I might later on make some reference to the non-residential taxation if we have time.
Sure, we will.
And that they perhaps, instead of constantly looking for increases, because it's not, is that, you know, teachers are doing a good job under some tough times. I found this out when I've toured the province in the small places that I've been to. They have done a great job. And the results, and they are concerned as much as anybody is. The problem that I have is that while they demonstrate the concern on one hand, why can they not be prepared to minimize their appetite for increases, particularly when you go over a period of 5 years to see how they've done. They've done reasonably well.
They've had 9% average over 5 years. They've done better than anybody else.
They've done reasonably well, and I can tell you they earn their keep. But the question is now, it's not whether, and I'm accused of teacher bashing, of course it's not true. What I'm saying is I just do not have any more money. Somebody the other night in Powell River says look at, you're teacher bashing. I said, what do you mean teacher bashing? I said, you tell me once when I have made some derogatory comment with respect to teaching. I can't find it, ever recall doing it. But he said, well, you won't let me have an increase. I said, I don't have any money to give you an increase. That's why. And if that's teacher bashing, then I guess I'm guilty.
More with Jack Heinrich, Minister of Education, after the break. Get this matter on the record with Mr. Heinrich, I have on the telephone Ed Lean, who's the registrar of the Compensation Stabilization Board. And the minister hadn't heard, Mr. Lean, about this mediation yesterday in Alberni. Can you tell me what happened between the teachers and the school board in Alberni with regard to a fresh increase?
Yes, I can. The mediation incidentally took place on Tuesday of this week.
And the recommendation is what?
Well, it wasn't a recommendation. It was more than that. It was through the process of mediation, a new agreement was reached. And that agreement provided for 3% effective January 1, 1985.
Uh-huh.
An additional 1% effective September 1, 85.
Uh-huh.
To run through to June 30th, 1986.
Uh-huh.
So that's a 4% increase on grid.
Right, that's 4% for all teachers regardless of their categories.
That's correct.
And
in addition to that, they have increments.
Oh, and they get their increments on top of that.
That's right.
That's the 3% increments.
3%, pardon me?
3% is the increment?
No. The increments are in the area of 1%.
Oh, that's why it comes up to about 5%.
5%.
That's for those who have the increments as well as the increase. Now, does this still have to be, so that for you, has the mediation decided that Alberni's got the ability to pay?
That judgment is left with the employer. The employer makes that determination.
All right, does this agreement still have to be given the stamp of payment and approval by Ed Peck, your commissioner?
Very definitely.
Well, these are the facts. Have you any questions for Mr. Lean on that, Mr. Minister?
No, I think probably it would be rather inappropriate for me to make any comment or ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lean.
Good day.
Much obliged. But at least we've established that there is a case where mediation by Alberni School Board has said, okay, we want to give our teachers 3% over 6 months, 1% plus increments for those who qualify. Does that shock you?
It depends on the financial position of the Alberni School District. It may very well be that they've had funds which they have been able to carry forward. It may very well be that because of a decline in enrollment, that there are going to be people leaving the area or the staff, and there may very well be the funds. I don't know, but I noticed one thing that the registrar did say. He said the employer makes the determination on the ability to pay, and obviously then the employer is going to be I presume would make it the representation before the commissioner.
Okay, I want to take a little study of one school district of which you're well aware, and perhaps it will, throughout the province, give people an idea of the devastation that has taken place compared to 1980, 81, 82. This is Richmond. You know,
well,
Richmond.
Let's be clear now. 1982 was the last year in which there was the most extraordinary increase took place in education. This is when the budgets were going up, and they varied from anywhere from 17, I think, to over 19%. That's 1982. So now we're talking about 1983 and 1984, and I think that there's quite a difference. And also in 1983, you would not find that great a discrepancy between 82 and 83. So let's make sure that the viewers understand the years you're talking about.
Well, let's make sure that they remember that you said last November, any district which has not practiced restraint and wishes to mount a lobby or protest will not get a sympathetic ear from me. You remember that undying quote?
Just a minute. What I said was this, Mr. Webster, and it was that I am interested in having constructive debate, and I'm interested in the school district advising me about service levels, which we have established for the first time in British Columbia, so that we can establish some degree of equity between districts province-wide.
Okay, well, here's a good example for you.
And I've been around the province and met I don't know how many districts in order to find out what they are saying about this.
Since June 82, the enrollment in Richmond School Board has gone up by almost 2%, 134 extra pupils from 17,000 so and so up, 134
and
pupils.
we're just now
It's gone up.
The students. What's the enrollment overall? I think we put it
17,621.
Okay, 17,600, and I see over here September 84, 17,500. So we've got an increase of 130 students on 17,000.
Just listen to what this good right-wing board, 6 of their members were elected after the teacher protest, and the chairman is one of the 6. Since 82, they've laid off 100 teachers, 150 non-instructional workers, eliminated, by the way, all library assistants, library clerks, class teaching assistants, career counseling assistants. School supplies have been reduced by 75% from 1,300,000 to 400,000. 15 janitors fired. And the real kicker is, and these are verified facts, the school district now faces layoffs of 100 more teachers, another 1.8 million in budget cuts. And you know what the chair of the school district tells us? Arbitration is a farce. We asked Heinrich to get rid of it, and since it doesn't mean anything. Now there you are, 200 odd teachers, 150 non-instructional staff. The Richmond School Board has been decimated.
Tell me something. You've given these figures. What's the PTR in Richmond? Did they tell you that?
The PTR in Richmond?
I know I have it here somewhere, but I don't
I have it too. Just let's take time and find it. By the way, the internal auditor resigned, not replaced. Assistant purchasing manager retired. Library assistants eliminated. Teaching assistants, 33 of them eliminated. I'll find the PTR in Richmond and let you know in a minute or two. But the point I'm making is, this can be duplicated throughout BC in many places, can it not? This kind of trimming.
I think you better put things in perspective again, because I'm not going to subscribe to that. Go to Richmond and you talk about the expenditures, and go to their board office and look for yourself. I mean, I'm not so sure for 17,000 people we need a 4-story building to accommodate the district office. You know, just keep that in mind. Also, the number of teachers in the decline of student population. Remember, we've gone from 525,000 down to about 472,000.
In BC.
Right. Let me give you just a narrow comparative piece of information. In 1979, 1980, there were 494,000 students in British Columbia. In 1984-85, there were 472,000, a drop of 22,000. In the system today, as compared to 79-80, there are 1,237 fewer teachers. Divide that into the differential number of students, and you get roughly 17.8. The provincial PTR is 17.73. Now, again, you know, your listeners are going to be baffled with the figures, but unfortunately, they all translate into dollars. Now, I've been on your program a number of times, or not a number of times, but every time there's always been the concern advanced by you, and I think reflecting what the community has been saying with respect to the growth of this industry.
Agreed.
And what happened is, as the enrollment was declining to the extent to which it was, we found the number of staff increasing, and then I also found that there seemed to be more administration in the staff. For example, rough figures, I think administration increased by 20% while enrollment declined by 10.
Yeah.
No.
I'll give you many of these points, Mr. Heinrich. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But you are commanding the system now. You've
Yeah.
taken away much of the autonomy of the school boards. Now, get back to my original point.
I want to raise a question on that.
But if you had merely said, or would say now, that arbitration is a waste of time because you've got no money, it would make the budgeting of school boards an awful lot easier, wouldn't it?
Of course it would make it easier. Of course it would make it easier. But I want also to try to put something in perspective. In 1982, people were concerned about expenditures, and they were getting out of control. We're not saving money in education. My job was to control expenditures, and I think that's what we're doing. When Bill 6 was brought in, we predicted budgets for 3 years. I conceded, I made, of course, publicly on your program, that yes, autonomy was eroded, but it was for a 3-year period of time. After budgets were to be brought in so there's some degree of control, then what we do is open after this time, and when we hope that there will be then access back to the residential tax base. And this was, the whole proposal was to do this in 1986. That's why there's a sunset provision, December 31, 86, within Bill 6 now. That's
Good.
what was amended.
More after the break. You'll be on there in a second. You see, what I want to get from the Richmond situation where the PTR is 18 to something, isn't it?
But 18 to 1.
18 to 1. It's what's happened to the quality of education. On the phone now, at her own request, is Tilly Marks Reiter. Have I got your name right, Tilly?
Yes.
Roughly right. You're the chairman of the school board.
Yes, I am.
What I want to get from you is what has, of all these layoffs done, and I understand there was only 100 non-instructional, not 150 laid off since 82. What have they done to the morale in the school, the teachers, the pupils, and the quality of education?
Well, the morale amongst teachers, of course, is low. I don't see where it's particularly affected the students. I think the quality of education is as good, if not better, than what we had in about 4 or 5 years ago. Most of those people who lost their jobs were only hired 4 years ago, and they were teacher aides. We had something like 63 teacher aides in Richmond, where some districts only had a dozen.
So when you got in, you cleaned up a lot of the slop that had been had by the previous school board?
I wouldn't call it that, but those are your words.
A lot of the excess hiring.
Well, what we used to get from the teachers was our pupil-teacher ratio is thus: rather than hire teachers whose salaries are high, why don't you hire teacher aides? Once the Richmond School Board began hiring teacher aides, and at one time had something like 82, then the teachers came and said, now your pupil-teacher ratio is higher than the rest of the metropolitan area. And I used to turn around saying, how many teacher aides does the rest of Metro have?
Well, I can understand that, but just a couple of things for the minister's benefit and for mine. Are you happy with the budget cuts?
No, I'm not happy with the budget cuts, but I think up to this point, I could understand them and understand that we in education also had to do our share.
Okay, now the next question. Do you say that arbitration is a farce?
Yes. It's a waste of money.
All right, there's one of your supporters saying arbitration is a farce. Why don't you wipe it out and make life easier for Tilly?
First of all, may I say good morning to Tilly?
Good morning, Jack.
And I want you to know that Richmond was one of the boards that I visited, and the chairman, Tilly Marks-Ryder, and her board made it very clear to me on that day that arbitration is a bit of a charade. And
it is.
I think that most people would agree under the present structure with the CSP program. It is a bit of a very difficult endeavor, and it's very difficult to justify right now.
But you're not prepared to take it out of the law at the moment, are you?
Well, I am addressing this particular issue, but I don't think these comments, subject to any discussion with my colleagues. Yeah. There's a matter of a significant policy change. And let me raise something with you. These people who are charged with the administration of school districts, like the chairman of the Richmond School Board, who's on the line, have got an opportunity, a golden opportunity, to advance to all of us as government their comments on the publication, which is now out and will be visited by public hearings during the month of February, entitled "Let's Talk About Schools."
That seems to be
just
a waste of time.
Oh, no, you're mistaken. It's not at all. And there are a number of ideas which I am sure will be advanced by people like the chairman of the board, and I think probably the chairman and trustees of a number of school districts in British Columbia.
All right, let me act as your PR man for a minute, because God knows you need one. Here you've got Tilly Marks-Ryder of the Richmond School Board, saying quite bluntly that she approves, do you, Tilly, and support the cuts up to this point, but are you now at the limit of the cuts?
What I was saying was that we understood that we had to do our share, and we tried to cooperate, and we have to this point. And that's the exact point we made with Mr. Heinrich when he came to visit us. But beyond this, it is going to be
a bloodbath.
It's going to jeopardize the quality of education. I firmly believe that. We made that point to Mr. Heinrich, and I don't think we can have any further cuts. We would be facing 75 to 100, depending... that 25 differences, depending whether the teachers get a salary increase, in June. And I don't think we can afford to lose those 100 teachers.
How many are laying off in June at the moment?
100.
100?
To 100, depending on circumstances.
If they don't get a raise, you'll only lay off 75?
Yes.
If they get the raise from PEC, you'll lay off 100?
Yes.
And she says that's beyond the pale, Mr. Heinrich.
Yes.
Because they've been told to cut 1.8 million.
Jack, is that I'm saying this for Richmond, and I made the point that we had a lot of teacher aides in Richmond. Some other districts, and I'm sure, are suffering a lot more than we are. I can think of Delta that had a handful of teacher aides. Because we had a budget and we had something like 63 teacher aides in there, we were able to relay those off last year and not affect as many teaching positions.
Ma'am, you've made a good case. Thank you for calling. Take a break and back with your calls to Jack Heinrich. It's nice to deal with details, Mr. Minister, but we mustn't forget the overall effect of your government's attitudes. In March 1984, the Association of Superintendents said that the changes have caused fears that your increased centralization will create a static, inflexible, restrictive, and fundamentally inadequate public education system. What's that?
Is that the famous Blackcomb report?
That's the superintendent's, March 84.
I've seen it, but if this is the one that it seems to me that was released by the superintendents.
That's correct. They said that
a day or 2 days before I spoke to them.
They said too that your changes are characterized by heavy-handedness and unwillingness to reconsider and to return the levels of educational service to the mid-70s.
Oh, Jack, that was a report which was put out in March of, would you say March of 84?
Yeah.
Look, since I have talked to just about every superintendent in British Columbia, I've met them at meetings, their own zone meetings, I've met them as individuals with their own school boards. I am finding throughout the province considerable support, particularly from the financial officers, the secretary-treasurers, about the new method of funding right now is far superior to the old. Now, just a minute, that's March. That's a year old.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to mention to you is this. When the system was introduced, it was new, some resistance. What did we do? We've made a number of changes, all of which were recommended by superintendents, secretary treasurers, trustees, and those amendments have been made to the entire framework in order to make adjustments which we felt were necessary. They knew that we had a difficult job to do, and they have been most helpful.
Have
now,
they?
It's a year old.
At this time, they said consultation would be reduced significantly, and they hated your guts.
Well, that's fine, but I don't think traveling the province for 3 months, meeting with all those people, is reducing consultation. And I defy you to find one who, in fact, could say that right now.
Any superintendent who hates Mr. Heinrich's guts, please call through the switchboard, and I'll put you on the air. You might get a surprise.
Oh, there will be one or two, sure.
Go ahead from Clinton, BC.
Hi, good morning. We have a whole different problem up here that I don't think Mr. Heinrich or anybody
Who's speaking?
care about. For one thing, this morning we have a snowy dammed highway and no crosswalk guard on it, and kids standing out there, and it's on Highway 97 at the bottom of a hill. We have no light. The snow is blowing, and parents are suddenly supposed to be responsible this morning to get their kids across the street.
Was there a crossing guard there?
There was, till this yesterday. He's there again this morning because the man has enough decency to care about those kids, the ones that the parents don't care about that might let their kids go out on the highway.
Is he there unpaid?
He's unpaid there this morning. And so are the police there. And the other thing, Jack, is that, I mean, if a semi hits its brakes at the top when it sees a kid, it'll take out all the kids on the side of the road. But that's what our board has had to get down to. Now, I think Mr. Heinrich is missing something. He's missing the concern of us parents. There are students out there, and we care. Now, you can play games with the board, and I get stories like always trying to break the board, and he said this morning Richmond doesn't need their board office. Who the heck do we turn to? We want the truth. So you think teachers are getting paid too much? That's up to you. Legislate against it. Do what you want. But when my son is now sitting down to make up his program in high school, I don't like you. I don't like what you're doing. We've got a fantastic high school in Clinton. You couldn't get anything better. Our principal has broke his neck. He's worth his weight in gold. Our staff is there day and night. We've had sales, we've made pies, we've scrubbed halls, we've done things to get money. Our kids haven't missed a sports trip. But you know what? I went to a meeting the other night, and the coffee and donuts were on the ministry. Do you know how many pies I've donated so that my kids can go and play basketball? This is our side of it. What are you going to do? You keep sitting there and dickering about wages. You keep sitting there and dickering about all these other things and board offices. What about us and our children? We are concerned. They're your future hope.
All right, just a minute, love. You're very emotional. What has he done particularly that you don't like right now?
Okay, our crosswalk guards. He wants to cut us another 2.5 teachers to the point where we might have to close our school or bus our grade 11s and 12s 50 miles again back down to Ashcroft, which is an overcrowded situation.
Oh, hold it just a minute. Just a minute.
Jack?
You know, first of all, Clinton is in South, excuse me, the South Caribou School District.
Yeah.
I met with the Clinton, or the South Caribou board.
In Kamloops.
That's correct. And I made arrangements for them to drive over from Ashcroft around. I met the representative who came from your particular area.
Yes.
I have talked about, and I believe David Stoddard is the name of your high school.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Right. And one of the items that I am concerned about in the levels within the framework was the small secondary school.
Right.
Now, I can go through the litany of the levels for a small secondary, but I think suffice to advise you as a caller that as a result of all the traveling I've been doing throughout the province and the problems which I encountered with respect to small secondary schools, I have made an adjustment to the service levels which will be incorporated within the 1985-86 budgets commencing July 1. With respect to the short fiscal year, the cuts which your school district have made are a few, and as I recall, I think they total something like $110,000 or $130,000. Now, it was some time ago that I met them.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I've been in contact with your Secretary Treasurer and also meeting with your board. I'm looking at those items, and I want you to be assured that I am. But one thing I cannot be responsible for is the allocation of funds within the district. That is up to your board. They must make that call.
Okay, now listen to me. You say that's up to the board. You've said that in Vancouver. You've said that in Surrey. You've got a total uprising in this province. When are you going to be responsible for what's happening? And you say that. You met our board. Sure, you met our board in Kamloops. And you know what? Our board is under the threat of death because they're scared stiff to say anything to you because you've already said if anybody says anything. And you've implied that. And whether you said it nicely or how you said it, people in the province...
Okay, ma'am, you've made a very good point. Just to summarize that point, a point is that you are the boss, you are in command, but you might as well take total command instead of putting the nitty-gritty on the back of these school boards.
Jack, I've got...
Hold on, love. Thanks very much for calling.
I have to make a comment. Some of the comments that caller has made are just, not only are they unnecessary, there's absolutely no reason to make them. The idea of threatening a board. I want you to know that I had a very good meeting with that board, and they were most encouraged as a result of what I did, and I think they will be encouraged with the results that I am able to produce for them. Recognize, and they must recognize in the area that it has a very, very low student population in South Caribou. And as a matter of fact, David Stoddard, I believe, as I recall, something like 125. Also in South Caribou, located next to Lytton, is Cumsheen High School. Again, very, very small.
I'm impressed with your knowledge, but I don't think that woman was saying that you went in there with a club threatening them.
I had a wonderful meeting with the board.
But I think that what she's saying is that you are the all-powerful minister. And that you can make arbitrary decisions which they'd like you to make so that the thing was resolved. Isn't that right? Now,
well, life is not that simple.
Here's a parents group from Kamloops. Are you there, Parents Action Group?
Yes.
Hold on, you're next up. Please be specific and not merely partisan. Hold on, please.
Kamloops, that, as I recall, they had
after the break.
They had a significant...
Parents Action Group from Kamloops. What points do you wish to raise with the Minister of Education, Jack Heinrich?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to let him know that if he thinks it's just Vancouver, he's going to find out it's not very soon. But just some facts from Kamloops, and these are from a restraint report that the school board, the right-wing school board in Kamloops here, put out. The general allocation, for example, this is the amount of money that the schools get per pupil, has gone down in 1982 from $36 to $26 per pupil. If you look at inflation, that's about a 40% drop in the amount of money per pupil that's going into education. I can give you figures on all kinds of things. The swim program, for example, has been wiped out. The field trips wiped out. Sports meets down 23%. Library funding down over 50%. Gifted and talented program wiped out. Music program wiped out. Who's he trying to kid?
It's devastation, Jack.
Yeah, but
absolute devastation. And at the same time he's doing this, he's increasing private school funding by 22%. Get him to tell us what that's all about.
Every particular group that wishes to take a shot at the public school system always throws out the matter of the independent school system. The independent school system is the money which they get is actually 30% of the average per student cost within the district where the independent school is located. Very simply, if the public education system had to absorb all students within the independent school system, I would need another $65 million.
All right.
Now, on these items which he is talking about...
All right, these are the items. Now, hold on, I'm going to put in a form of a question. Do you want, because of restraint, to wipe out in all schools field trips, swim programs, sports programs, more library funding, gifted and talented students, and music programs?
Yeah, you see what happens, the question comes out over the air. This statement is made. I would like to look, is he referring, as a matter of fact, to 1 or 2 grades? Is he talking about a swim program for grade 3 students? Or is he talking about a music...
I'm talking about district-wide, Mr. Heinrich. I've got the facts right here in front of me. Operational budget, a comparison from 82 to 84, put out by your friends on your school board.
Are these district-wide cuts of these programs?
Absolutely, Jack. District-wide cuts.
Well, first of all, I think he's making, he's in error with respect to the, referring to our friends on that particular board, this Kamloops School Board, because I know as a matter of fact, that the chairman is a member of the opposition party, and usually where you find a chairman...
on that board, and again, you're trying to confuse this with rhetoric garbage. Why don't you answer the question?
Do you want all these programs wiped out throughout the province?
And I'm going to go on the limb and say that I will not accept the statements which he has made about all of those problems. How can I conceivably answer a statement like that without having all of the facts before me?
I hope you're not going to let him get away with this, Jack, because I've got this right in front of me. I'm not lying. He's accusing me of lying, and this man is incredible. Don't let him get away with it, please.
It's up to you to decide whether or not to get away with it, but thanks for your
call. Get away with it from us, I'll tell you that. But
thanks for your call.
That I'm giving you are absolutely true. These are not false facts. I'm looking at the paper right in front of me here, and I know people whose kids were in the gifted and talented program, which is now gone. My daughter is in elementary primary school. She's been in split classes since she got out of kindergarten of over 30 students every year. Who is he trying to kid?
You made your point. Send me a copy of your document. I want to get
I have a question on here. We're talking of classes. One of the items that they didn't raise with us was the number of students in the district, the PTR, which is about 18, and also the average size of classes within the district. As a matter of fact, when I was in Kamloops, one of the comments, and I asked this particular question of the number of students in the classes, and one member of the press, interesting enough, came out and started advocating one particular school where he said there were considerably more than 30 students per class. I tried to check that out. When I got back to Victoria, I made contact through one of my people with the Kamloops board office to say, what was he telling me? The board did not raise that particular item with me. What school is he talking about? Came back, and I gathered it was really a somewhat enlarged story. So you see, I appreciate the sincerity and with which your caller advances his concerns.
But you don't think he's right?
I don't know whether he's right or not. I do not know. He tells me that he has a statement from produced by the board. That may very well be the case. The question is, I have inevitably found out when I have received these types of concerns, which are expressed by sincere parent groups, that when you penetrate and find out what it's really all about, it's not quite the way it's been advanced.
But I must say,
but I will tell you that there are some concerns. There have been demands and expectations in the public school system. And right now we're in a contracting period, and a lot of people are beginning to find a bit of difference.
You don't think it's gone too far? I know that as Minister of Education you have no control over priorities, but people are saying that your government's priorities are wrong. That while restraint is necessary, it should not be restraint in education. Look what you're doing to BCIT, which I presume, I'm presuming is a good and competent operation, although it's always been kind of top-heavy in ways. But the cuts to BCIT sound horrendous.
All right, let's have a look.
How many faculty being laid off?
Jack, look, you know, when we get a little overweight, sometimes we've got to lose some of it.
Slim.
That's right. Now, at BCIT, I recognize there is a reduction in their budget. I've got before me the requests made by the management team at BCIT, which have been tabled before the business agents representing the unions involved, what they would like to do in order to preserve the status quo, if at all possible. Now, I think it's 10%, probably somewhere around $3.5 million. These are the items which have been tabled. First of all, people at BCIT are really at the top of the scale. They've been there for some time, and they have moved up the scale. I know right now that the salary to the senior instructors, and those, as a matter of fact, after, I forgot how many years it is, but it's not all that many, to be honest with you. And with benefits included, they're paid about $50,000, but probably a touch, in many cases, a touch more than $50,000. Okay, that's fine, and nobody's going to quarrel with that. It's a comfortable position. What they have asked out at BCIT is this. Look, if you will increase your workload from 15 hours per week to 18 hours per week, we then will be able to save, and what they've tabled is $1.5 million. Now, 15 hours per week to 18 hours per week. I recognize that there's a lot of preparation involved, but even though there's preparation involved, I wonder if there's all of that preparation, that amount of preparation is required, because they turn around and tell me 2 to 1 for somebody who has been teaching particular subjects for a long time. So that's all I'm asking. Another item they're talking about is perhaps maybe if they 15-hour workload was increased to 18 hours, and they would do 3 hours of unpaid community education in the evening, because they're already getting a reasonably comfortable annual salary. And they get 2 months off in the summertime.
9 weeks holiday they get.
Well, you know, that's fine. We all make our choices the direction in which we want to go. Their choice was that we like this type of career. and there are certain benefits to that career. However, when tough times come along, we've got to do it. There's another item out there which concerns me a bit, and that is and it's under the agreement in which they're trying to negotiate, I understand, and that's restructuring of the educational leave. Because what can happen is there is an agreement where 2% of the monies, the grant monies which they receive, go towards what they call educational leave. And that's 2% of the total grant which we as a government make. After 5 years or 6 years, something like this, they're entitled to educational leave, and it goes anywhere from, I don't know, probably several weeks up to maybe 6 months.
Let me stop you there,
That's
Jack.
70%
of their salary.
Yeah.
I
now
know.
Look, all we're saying is in these tough times, pull back a little bit.
There are two answers I must put to you on that. One is that the public is suddenly told there are going to be, I think it's 70 positions and a number of courses wiped out at BCIT by the $3.5 million cut, right?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, what's important too, the reason that this notice was given now is under their agreement. They must give notice, because they must give 6 months severance in the event of termination. And if they don't do it now, the penalty is worth about $25,000 a day to BCIT.
But what you're telling me is that the administration of BCIT, over which you have had total command, has made lovely deals for their faculty and staff which offend you.
No, they're not just offend me.
What
I'm saying, in these difficult times, we can't afford that.
Right, and you should never have afforded them in the first place, should you?
Well, I think it happened throughout all of society. All out of society.
So you're coming in as the ogre, and you're cleaning up.
I'm not very popular right now.
You're the ogre cleaning up all these generous, what you would call giveaway fancy contracts for low productivity in technical schools.
Let me give you another example on something.
Am I right, though? Do you agree with me?
Well, I have a difficult job to do. Now, let me raise another point with you.
No, take a break, Jack. We're running behind.
Okay.
After the break. Believe it or not, I have some sympathy with the minister. He's doing his job for the cabinet as instructed. Cut, 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 trim, 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 right? You're not very popular, least of all with the teachers. I want you to look into that camera and just tell the teachers, Pat Clark and company, who don't seem to be asking for wage increases except in arbitration, what happens if they get wage increases to the quality of education?
Well, it's obviously we've got a concern, and I have made it clear over a long period of time that the compounded effect of increases over 5 years has been fair. Now, if we are that concerned about quality of education, and I know the majority of teachers are, they really are, and they're devoted, and that's what they want to do. They just want to get on with teaching and get out of this confined.
Why don't you say to them, if they don't go for wage increases, they'll have job security?
This is what I've found out as I've been traveling around the province. I have found the odd school district, as a matter of fact, that entered into an agreement with its local teacher association. Now, that's true, without the necessity of going to arbitration. I would have hoped that many more would have, instead of automatically taking the arbitration process, because that's the process where they move because they think they will get more. Now, I can't blame them for thinking they're going to get more, because that's exactly what the history has been over a long period of time. But what I am saying, really, is that if we can curb our appetites for a 6-month period, it may very well help out. And if they're that concerned about quality of education, all we have to do is find out, well, what type of 1% with our budget is an incredible amount of money. $10 million, and it doesn't take long before that starts to add up. And that's all I'm really looking for.
You're saying that if you want more money, be prepared to lose jobs.
Well,
that's right.
It's going to be very difficult.
But that's what you say.
It's going to be very difficult.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, I want to know, how much is outdoor school costing us every year? Why isn't that canceled? To me, it seems like a waste of time. And then another question is that my children are in the North Vancouver District School. I have children with science texts, with sections missing out of these textbooks. I spend the majority of my time running around to other children and hopefully they will have that section in that science book. I can see what the teacher's point, I can see Mr. Heinrich's point. Maybe we should stop having all these frills in school. Maybe we're expecting too much out of the
What
teachers
is this school you talked about? What is this outdoor school?
Okay. What do we want them to do next? Have our kids for us too? Maybe we have to get back just to the 3 R's. Eliminate cooking and sewing and all the rest of the frills. If we can't afford to pay for them, then we shouldn't be having them. Maybe we as parents are going to have to teach our kids how to sew and cook and make a desk and all the rest of it, and stop placing it on the teachers all the time.
What is this outdoor school you're talking about?
They bus kids up to Squamish somewhere. In the elementary schools, they go up there for a week. Now, what they're doing my kids have never gone because I'm the type of parent, I want to know who they're with, what they're doing, and who's looking after them, and I don't know anybody up there, so you're not going. But they spend a week up there in elementary school, and I've heard this apparently costs us millions of dollars a year. They bus them up on buses and bring them back.
Mark, outdoor school at Squamish, busing kids from North Van to Squamish. They're away for a week. This woman thinks it costs millions. Let's do a little piece on it. Get the facts on it next week. Now, what about her back to 3 R's?
No, I can appreciate perhaps the concerns that she's expressing. First of all, on the outdoor school, I have heard some comments on it. I don't really know anything about that particular school, but I do know there has been some concern expressed. I don't really think that we have...
District 44 goes up there. And that's what? North Vancouver.
Yes, I recognize it's the North Van School District. But as far as the other items are concerned, look, there is within the present funding, there is more than adequate funds to look after a number of those courses. I mean, there's got to be home economics and nutrition courses and industrial education. Those are available and within the school, and the funding is there for it. I think there may be, there obviously is a number of items which they might want to address.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Of course.
Morning, sir.
Donald Rippon, the president of BCIT Student Association calling. How are you, Mr. Heinrich?
Morning.
We were told about an hour ago all the implications of the funding situation at BCIT. I wanted to get your comments. We understand that as far as education funding goes, there's no dollars left in the pot.
Oh, just a minute.
Do you feel that the BCIT administration is acting responsibly when these implications are taking place, such as 89 instructors eliminated, the full counseling department, the audiovisual department, 5 full programs, 14 instructors from the communications department, and various other implications? What are your comments on the whole situation?
Well, I didn't have an opportunity to tell Mr. Webster this, but you're aware, Don, that the BCIT and the board and its administration did not have any other alternative than to issue the notices today or yesterday because of the terms of the collective agreement with their staff, which requires 6 months' notice and severance. You are also aware that the government has not yet given to the colleges and institutes the 85-86 budget. And you're aware of that. That's something that I've been working on for a considerable period of time.
So we've been given the figure of 10.7.
Well, and the figure that you were talking about is the amount. If you recall, we went over what was a 2 or 3 year projection in order to address these issues over during a restraint period. And there have been a number of adjustments made. I am not in a position to advise BCIT what its budget will be, but I think you must recognize why they're doing this. Another thing which the public ought to know about is this, is because of the severance requirements under the contract, it is necessary to issue notices to 50% more than are actually needed because they have to get enough to cover wages for a period of 6 months. And so if you really don't require 10 people, you must give notice to 15.
But that's fine. We can understand that, and that's very complicated. And you obviously think the provisions made for the instructors and the contracts have been far too generous in the past. But Don should know, too, that an attempt was made to negotiate 3 hours additional instruction.
Let's be clear on this. What has happened, this, I am told, has been tabled by management, and it's public, it's between the parties now. It has been tabled. I think there ought to be, under the present environment, a great deal of latitude and an opportunity for some discussion in order to minimize the impact of these cuts.
Don, that's the best I can do for you because of the strictures, not of budget, but of time. I'll be back after the break. Let's try and go through some phone calls quickly. We've only had 3 or 4 phone calls all morning. My questions have been long, his answers have been long, people on the phone have been long. Let's go for a quick selection of reaction. Go ahead to the Minister.
Hello, I'm concerned about the education of my 3 daughters as well, but I'm more concerned about my university education and the preclusion of their ever going to university. The 5% cuts that you've forced on UBC and may be forcing on them again this year have made it necessary for them to raise tuition 33% last year and 33 to 50% next year. Now that's from $1,100 to $1,500 and maybe $2,000 next year. If I don't get my university education, I will never be able to make enough money to give them a university education.
Okay, Jack, what do you say to that briefly?
Briefly, tuition is running now roughly 16%, as I recall, of the actual cost of instruction. So if somebody is paying out a tuition of $1,200 or $1,300, that's 18% of what the actual cost is. I recognize there are some difficulties involved, but in my view, it's a significant investment, and I think most people are quite able to cope with that. If they are not able to cope with it, we have made provision for funding interest-free to any qualifying student. Interest does not begin to accumulate until
for university?
That's correct.
I thought you had cancelled it.
No, the grant portion was cancelled, but what we have done is made funding available for them.
To any qualified student, interest-free, anywhere,
right. That's
any university?
Within the university, and as a matter of fact, the college system as well, to help out. And that is not repayable until they are gainfully employed.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, I feel that Mr. Heinrich is back in the 30s, that we are educating for the 80s and 90s. We're driving our good teachers out. We're teaching students from many cultures and language. And as for the board plans at Richmond, they have been over to Victoria years ago and were approved by Victoria, and the board had to get out of their present space because the municipality wanted it.
Now, what about ESL? I know a school in Vancouver where ESL has been slaughtered because of budget cuts.
The amount of money, as I recall, to Vancouver for special needs is somewhere between $26–30 million, maybe more, of which 16 point some odd million is going towards ESL, and I believe in 85–86 it's something in the order of about $20 million.
In other words, there's enough money for ESL.
Look, Jack, there is a great deal of money which is advanced. What happens is some areas have an insatiable appetite. The money, it just disappears in the system, and it's very difficult. You know, once programs are in...
No, the Vancouver School Board doesn't handle it right.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that whenever you put money into a system, it is immediately absorbed, and there's always a demand for more. It can never really be satisfied.
I know, but ESL's a problem, I'll tell you.
Yes, and I recognize it, and that's why Vancouver is by far the greatest, the highest funded district in British Columbia, because they have by far the largest number of students who speak English as a second language.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mr. Heinrich. It's nice to put a question directly to you. I have, like a lot of people, trouble with your figures that you give. And in front of me, I'd like to just put a couple of figures to you.
Yes?
I've got a Statistics Canada report, Education in Canada, 1980-83. And it lists the expenditures of the whole of Canada, every province, including the national average for the last 5 years. And if you take it as a percentage of personal income, is the bottom of the pile for the last 6 years.
Except for Newfoundland?
No, including Newfoundland. The average, for example, for Newfoundland, percentage of personal income for 1981-82 is 8.1%. For British Columbia for the same year, it's only 5%.
Yeah, we're the bottom of the totem pole.
We've got to respond to that.
The point I'd like to ask Mr. Heinrich about is, when you say that your job was to cut fat, what fat are you actually cutting? Because British Columbia clearly, according to federal statistics, and where else can you get information, according to federal statistics, British Columbia has never invested in education as heavily as other provinces.
May I respond to that?
If you can, briefly and succinctly.
Well, it's more. I'll try. First of all, this is often advanced by associations such as the BCSTA and the BCTF. And what they tell you is that as a percent of personal income or some particular economic expression, British Columbia is at the bottom of the totem pole. Unfortunately, you know, to me it's immaterial whether it's 1% or 20%. What is important is the amount that goes to the students. First, if you look, and I gave this information out to Vancouver in the area at the beginning of the week. If you look, number one, at the PTR across Canada, you'll find that we compare very, very favorably. If you look to the average cost of administration,
not accurate, Mr.
just
Heinrich.
excuse me, just a minute.
Accurate figures, and you don't. You produce false figures.
No, am I going to be?
You can't say he produces false figures if he makes a statement which he believes to be correct.
Reports.
But Stats Canada, I know the figure you're referring to, and they refer in turn to the cost per student, the parent-teacher ratio.
Why does every other province use Stats Canada, and Mr. Heinrich chooses not to?
Excuse me. I mean, I want an opportunity to respond to this. If you wish to look at the comparative per pupil expenditures across the country, here is the information which came from the Council of Ministers of Education of Canada, data and telephone survey. Second one, pupil-teacher ratios across the country. Where does BC rate? Right here, and there's your line there.
It's about the top, yeah.
No, look at this, 70, here we are, we're 70.73, draw that line across, and you'll see that we're an average. Higher you find in Ontario, higher you find in New Brunswick. Now, when I say higher in PTR, that means there's more kids in the class. Provincial average teacher salaries across the country. British Columbia, second.
Second next to Ontario.
Correct. Okay, now when you add all of these...
Give me that first one as well. I'm quite interested in this, because I don't believe the StatsCan figures either.
Well, this is operating budgets, an indication of the amount of money which is put in by us, okay?
What's that one?
Per pupil expenditures. Now, there's a good example. Per pupil expenditures, if you're interested, across...
We're slightly below Alberta and Ontario.
Correct. Now, what happens is they often throw out the information on compared to your gross provincial income. It doesn't work. You have to look at the cost per student.
Mr. Heinrich, Honourable
Yes,
Minister, you are in a dreadful spot. The majority of the people of British Columbia are now convinced, perhaps it's all propaganda, perhaps it's not, that you are decimating the system in the name of restraint, and that your government's priorities are totally and absolutely and unalterably wrong.
Yeah, you don't believe that.
Is that not a fair interpretation?
No, I don't believe that to be a fair interpretation, but in some areas of the province and with some people in each school district who feel very strongly about this, you are going to receive comments such as you have just made.
Well, I don't know if we added anything at all to the sum total knowledge of education, but maybe a glimmer or two did get through to both sides of the fence. My thanks to Jack Heinrich, who's been very patient this morning.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to meet a charming lady, very briefly, from Prince Rupert, after the break.
Mrs. Basso.
I'd like you to meet Alderman Evelyn Basso, B-A-S-S-O, who's been 10 years an alderman in Prince Rupert and bullied her way onto the Webster show this morning to tell us about Prince Rupert's which birthday?
75th.
75th birthday. We've been getting
Yes.
the pension for 10 years.
Yes.
What are you going to do for Rupert's birthday?
We're going to have the biggest birthday party that you've ever heard about. And I'm here this morning to present you with an invitation to join us in all the celebrations.
Invitation to birthday party in Prince Rupert.
And
oh.
We started our plans about 6 months ago, and some of the things we are doing and have done is we have put out this seafood celebration cookbook. And it is a beautiful community cookbook with some of the best recipes in town. And we want you to have that copy. And
I'm allergic to crab and shellfish.
Never mind, my uncle tells me you went out on a halibut trip once.
I'm a hero.
I know you are. I know about halibut fishing.
Oh, that was a nightmare.
I know. Anyway, Mr. Webster, we want you to have that copy. We'll hope you'll use some of the recipes.
My wife will.
We have sold 2,000 copies of this cookbook in about 1 month. We have turned a profit of $8,000 on
How
this.
much is it?
$10 a copy.
Do I get it by writing to you?
Or City Hall.
City Hall, Prince Rupert.
Yes, we'll get you
Closing
one.
$10.
$10, $1.50 for postage.
$11.50, she means.
And we are in our second printing. It'll be ready in 2 weeks. And it's a
Great.
beautiful cookbook. We have recipes in there by people like Foster Hughesoy, let me see, Sheila Lidd. Mayor Lester has a recipe in that
Old
cookbook.
Pete. Old Pete. He's a
Yes.
wonderful guy. Now, it's your 75th birthday, and the celebrations take place on Monday, March the 4th.
They start then, yes.
Through Monday, March the 7th.
To Sunday.
Monday
no,
through...
to Sunday, the
Oh,
whole
I
week.
see.
Yes.
The whole week,
yes.
from Monday to Sunday.
Yes. Before we carry on with that, may I also show you another thing? Do you know that we own the second largest telephone system in the province? The city owns its own telephone system, and this is our telephone book cover this year in commemoration of the...
You've got some of these pictures here, haven't you?
Now, I don't know whether you had those specifically.
Let's
you
see
have
what
some
we've
of our
got
old
Rupert,
10 town days.
How many years ago is that?
I think that's 1908.
Next one. We've got a pan over, I believe.
That's 1910. Already in 2 years, you see the tents are gone, and we have some pretty substantial buildings there.
Pan again. What's that?
1910.
Oh, yes, but and after, next one more.
And that's 1910. Do you see the kind of roads we had in those days? And I hope they'll show your viewers the shot of the present-day Prince Rupert, because people have the wrong idea of what Prince Rupert is like, and it's such a beautiful place.
These idiots haven't got it on the stand.
Oh, well.
But we know how beautiful Prince Rupert is.
Oh, you don't.
We do know how beautiful it is.
Anyway.
And Evelyn Basso, I wish I had time really to flog your cookbook, but I recommend
all
it.
right.
$11.50
Yes,
to
that's all
City
right.
Hall. The 75th birthday party is starting the week of Monday, March the 4th. It's going to be a ball, including all kinds of things, including a Muskeg Mashers golf tournament. There's Prince Rupert as of today.
Yes,
We
a
fooled you.
beautiful city.
Champagne, smorgasbord lunches for people who've been there 50 years. 1910 night, silver dollar pancake breakfast, and everything impeccably organized. And it's going to be a ball in Rupert as of Monday, March the 4th. And my thanks to Evelyn Basso.
One special highlight will be the Marine Plate smorgasbord.
Marine Plate smorgasbord after the break.
On the Saturday night.
Like my new glasses. Monday morning, principal guest, John Fraser, Tory Cabinet Minister, Minister of Fisheries. Great trouble on the coast with sports fishermen trawlers at 9 a.m. precisely. Just a wee touch on the ball.
It's going to come out black.
Oh, no, it's all right. We'll try it anyway. Great. I covered my bald spot.
Well,
a lot of people know and respect Jack Webster. I travel all over and they say, oh, we really enjoy you when you're on Webster, but we didn't realize that you're so tall. We thought you and Webster were about the same height. I said, the next time I go on, we're going to stand up.
Two shot.
So you are really just a little squirt.
We're called
called mixed blood, mongrels, half-caste, dirty yellow bellies. We were kicked around. Our fate, the fate of a Eurasian girl, was to be a prostitute. Ha!
The Education Minister Heinrich on the crisis on Check at Midnight.